Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Back and Forth with Becker and Orr. That's Kevin. I'm Clinton. We're ready to go. Lots of topics to tackle today. You can see them on the bottom on the screen. We're talking Bitcoin. Has that replaced gold as a store of value? We're going to talk about that. Also, near the end of the session, we're going to have some fun. We're going to have a rapid fire session here, a lightning round. So you want to stick around. It's going to be some fun with Back and Forth with Becker and Orr.
Yeah, and remember, we have a website, beckerorr.com, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. We'd love to see you, and we'd love to give you some content. So why don't you start us off with some Bitcoin here, Clint?
Let's just dive right into it here. This is Bitcoin. We have the 1 year chart up here, and you can see it's just taking off like a rocket here, Kevin. Hard to believe it was in that kind of $4,000 or $5,000 range and then touched over $50,000 US just a couple of days back. Walk us through. What are your thoughts here when you look at this chart with Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that question all the time. What is Bitcoin? Well, it's a digital currency. It's non-regulated, limited quantity sort of scenario. But yeah, I mean, it's just taken off like it's brand new. Everybody wants it. It's the shiny new toy out of the box, it seems. And so, of course, everybody starts to pile in. So we've had just, an incredible run out of this. But is it the new gold? Is it something that needs to be regulated? Is it the new currency for the way people are going forward? What do you think?
If you think of why people used to own gold, I mean, I was always told, well, it's a store of value. People hold it against hedge against the US dollar. Maybe they use it to hedge against inflation. Many of those items have happened in 2020. And yes, gold had an initial run and then it did nothing for the last number of months. It's actually underperformed against other assets. But here you go, Bitcoin, that same environment, and we're seeing Bitcoin take off. So is Bitcoin replacing gold as a store of value? Are people using it as a hedge against the dollar? I think to some extent that is true. I think to some extent we're seeing Bitcoin as maybe the gold of the new generation, kind of the gold of the younger people, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and again, I think the fact is that it's been a little bit more validated recently. I mean, you've had companies like Tesla come out and buy 1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin to make it legitimate. PayPal, MasterCard, all of them are participating a little bit more in this Bitcoin scenario. So as you get more and more large name companies to go in, I think it becomes more and more of a valid process going forward. And you've got things along the lines of now new ETFs being created in regard to what Bitcoin is. And I mean, you usually don't get that unless it's become a popular scenario. So that would sort of be my view as to where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is, remember back in 2017, we had the initial rally. Bitcoin was still kind of seen as this kind of niche item that wasn't really mainstream. It was more kind of on the side, very speculative. It's still quite speculative, so a lot of volatility involved, but it certainly is more mainstream. And like you mentioned, institutions are now participating, adding some stability there. That doesn't mean it's not a little frothy. I mean, you mentioned Tesla stepping in. Tesla's a really big company. We've seen smaller companies. I'll pull up an example here of MicroStrategy. You can see their stratospheric chart here. Just look at that rocket ship takeoff. They do software. That's what they do. They do cloud computing software. That's their whole business model. And recently they just started buying Bitcoin. And then they raised money, and that's what the headline at the bottom is there from CoinDesk, saying they raised money, over $1 billion, and they told people, we're just going to use that money to buy Bitcoin. They're not going to put it into their software products. They're not even going to pretend to use it for their company. And their share price just took off here, Kevin, from $100 to like $1,200. When you see that chart, is that sustainable? Is that just ring all the alarm bells of mania? What's going through your mind?
Wow. No, I agree. I think that's something that's got to be a little bit spooky. This is definitely not for the faint of heart. Volatility is there. If you're going to consider it, it's definitely a spec play at best. I mean, the last thing I want to do is wind up 2 days ago buying it at 57, wake up this morning finding out it's $48,000. So yeah, it is definitely still more of a, we're betting on it, more like the mini manias that have gone on. But I think that this is more a long sustainable scenario going forward, just because of the legitimacy that we're seeing with other companies getting into it, as it were.
This rally is probably more legitimate. This rally has probably got more sustainability than the ones we've seen in the past, but it doesn't mean that we haven't had a little bit of froth still mixed in there, right? That mini mania, fear of missing out, is certainly applied to Bitcoin as well. We're seeing a little bit of that mixed in.
Yeah, I mean, and that's basically where it is. So off of the topic of Bitcoin, let's get on to something that's a little more close to coming true to fruition this year, the Olympics. Now, we can talk about the Olympics in sort of two phases. There are two of them coming up in less than a year. Now, we've had the postponement of the Japanese, or the Tokyo Olympics from 2020 will now take place between July and August of 2021. And then there's Beijing in February of next year. Well, what do you think we're going to deal with? Is this going to happen? What's going on with it?
Yeah, I think the Tokyo Olympics are going to happen, and there's such a dichotomy there. The population within Japan, by and large, you're talking almost 70-80% do not want the Olympics to take place. They're afraid of it. It'll be a COVID spreader event, but most of the population outside of Tokyo says that's a good idea. Let's have the Olympics. And I think it's going to go ahead. I think there's a lot of pressure to make sure these Olympics do take off, and Tokyo's invested a lot of money in the venues and making sure they're ready for this. So I think it happens. I'm just not sure if the folks inside of the country are going to be too happy about it.
No, and I think you're right. I think it wouldn't have mattered where it was. I mean, if you're holding it over in Paris or you were holding it in the United States, it'd all be the same. We don't want everybody else coming in and infecting our population, and then where do we go from there? And I mean, it's already led to, and I'll keep this sort of quick, is that I know that the event of wrestling has been taken out of the Tokyo Olympics specifically because of the close contact between people. So whether or not we see all the Olympic events, it's going to be something to see, and whether or not it works out that way. Now, Beijing, of course, is a completely different scenario. We're going into an event that probably has less contact, but what are the big problems we got with Beijing?
Yeah, now that's less people are not so worried about COVID for that, because that's a 2022 scenario. But all the human rights issues with China, they've long been plagued with those kind of issues, and they're using the Olympics as kind of a lightning rod to bring all that to the forefront, to have that discussion. And there certainly are some human rights abuses, and they need to be discussed. But is the Olympics the right avenue for that chat? Should the Olympics really be the lightning rod for that? Are these protests and these boycotts are going to be effective? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this before. I mean, the 76 Olympics, the 80 Olympics, the 84 Olympics all had boycotting that went on. And reality is, at the end of the day, I think that the only thing that happened was athletes missed out on being able to participate in an event that basically is supposed to be more connecting as opposed to diversity. So I think things along the lines of sanctioned trade policy and stuff like that are a lot more effective going forward, as opposed to saying, oh, we're going to boycott. Because theoretically, at the end of the day, you're going to get enough countries that are going to participate. All I think you're doing is hurting some of the athletes. I understand the rationale behind it, but I don't know that that's the best avenue to go with. So
I'd be in agreement there. It's going to happen, in my opinion. It's far too close for them just to pull out and move it to another country. Like, there's way too much involved logistically for that to happen. And I think there's going to be enough athletes that go from other countries that it will take place. Now, whether or not Canada, the U.S., and the other countries that are talking about a boycott join them, I'm not sure. But I agree with you. There's probably a more effective way for the government to address those human rights issues than to use the Olympics as the avenue.
Exactly.
But let's move on here. Let's pull another chart up. We'll go back to the markets here, Kevin. We have an all-time high in all-time highs. You have the most stocks getting all-time highs, and that's looking at the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. That's the red line on the bottom. You can see it shoot up. And then you have the S&P 500, which is the U.S. stock market, the blue line there. Usually this is a good sign. It means more stocks participating in the rally, more stocks making new highs. That's typically positive. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting that whole sort of scenario. You mentioned sector rotation, breadth of the market is incredible right now. So, I mean, whereas everything was sort of tech oriented back in April straight through till about November or December sort of scenario, now that you're starting to see, more fiscal stimulus, more monetary stimulus, and the ongoing amount of that going forward, you're starting to see that cycle into the value stocks. So the banks, the pipelines, anything that's been beaten down, they're all starting to run, and now they're hitting new highs. So when you couple all that together, you're going to get that. You're going to get new market highs followed by a whole bunch of new company highs. Now, this may not be sustainable. There may be some fluctuation based on it going forward. I think a lot of that will depend on, what we see going on with the virus, with the vaccine and everything in the next couple of months. What's your view?
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great breadth measure, shows that there's more market participation. Usually it's positive. Usually we see these huge thrusts of breadth in the beginning of bull markets, not towards the end. So it's a positive sign, but that doesn't mean we can't have a correction or a pullback or some kind of bump or bruise along the way. It doesn't mean it's going to be a straight line up. So you're right. We could see a bit of a correction, but overall that's a sign of a new bull market, and that is a positive development for investors. So we're going to move on here to a fun item that we brought up here. We're going to do a lightning round, Kevin. Are you ready for this? Yes. I got my questions here.
I'm ready.
And we're going to do 5 minutes. We'll go rapid fire here with the questions. I'll give you 20 seconds to answer. And if you go over, I don't really have a buzzer, but I'll just start talking over you. We'll just stop.
Yeah, that works.
Here we are. We got the first question. I got them ready to go. And they're going to be a whole host of topics. Some of them are going to be financial, some non-financial. We're going to cover everything here. First question.
I got my bacon toucan. I'm ready.
Will movie theaters open fully before the end of the year?
I have a feeling that's going to be a no. I would love to say yes. I'm a huge movie buff and I love going to the theater to see it, but I just think that it's taken so long to get to this point that if we don't have that herd immunity by August or September or even October, we're going to be gone. I just think that it's done. So no, not by the end of the year, but hopefully by the end of next year.
All right. Question number 2 here. Will we have a Canadian federal election in 2021, this year?
I'd love to say yes, but I think that this may be held out a little longer. I mean, I know that once we start getting more vaccine and things in, that it's going to depend on how the Liberals look going forward. I mean, if Justin Trudeau figures that he's got enough vote, he'll call it, or he'll find a way to do it. If not, he's going to delay this as long as he possibly can, because the last thing he wants to do is leave power. So I'm not betting on it this year.
We'll call that the end of the buzzer right there. That'll be the end of the question. Moving on to number 3, hockey question for you. You're a hockey buff. Can the Jets win the North Division with its present lineup?
Well, I'm biased. I'm a huge Jets fan. So, yes, I do believe they do. I think now that Dubois is playing, you give him a little more seasoning, get him back with his legs underneath him. I think we have an offensive team that can do enough of it. If Hellebuck returns to Vezina form, which he's slowly moving into, we do compete for that North Division. Regardless of what the pundits say or the experts, we can. I believe that.
All righty here. Question number 4, financial question. Will the Dow Jones hit 35,000 this year?
I don't see it. I just can't. I mean, basically where we are right now, you're looking at probably another 10 to 12%. That would be another phenomenal year to have like we did in 2019. I think we've had a huge run up now. I mean, it depends on stimulus and a few other odds and ends, but I think that 35 is going to be a hard point to break. 34 maybe, but not 35.
Yeah, that's a stretch. Probably a stretch.
Yeah.
Last one I got for you here, number 5. Can we have an Academy Awards this year when we've had such limited films?
My view is no. They will. I guarantee it, but I don't think you should. What has there been, like 8 movies released this year? Everything's been delayed till 2022 almost, or 2021, should I say, summer. I mean, I didn't get James Bond. I didn't get to see the new Mission Impossible stuff and everything else. Matrix is going to be coming out soon. So no, I believe they will hold it, but I don't believe they should. I just don't think everything's going to be Netflix and Amazon Prime oriented. Okay, I'm done my questions. My turn to hit the lightning round with you. I'm going to read from this because I don't have it all scripted out. Now, will we be attending sporting events this fall? And will we do it fully or partially?
It's going to be partial. That's my view. I can't see us going fully. Canada's been more conservative the way we've been reopening, the way the vaccine distribution has happened. We're not like down in the southern states where they just let folks attend all the events. So I think maybe partial. Maybe we'll be able to have a couple people at a Jets game this fall. That's my view.
Perfect. Okay. Now, with the way things are going, will Biden be able to pass his $1.9 trillion package, or, is it going to be more or less?
I think they get $1.9 trillion on the nose. I don't think they do them a lot of compromise. I think they do a lot of political shenanigans to make it look like they're trying to be bipartisan. But at the end of the day, they have the votes. I think they just push it through, and we get the $1.9 trillion stimulus through. A bonus question for you here. I don't think the market's going to care. I think it's already priced in. So we'll get the 1.9, but there won't be much of a reaction because people were already expecting it.
All right. Okay, done with that one. Now, does Connor McDavid win the MVP this year?
Yes.
No explanation needed.
Is there one needed? He's been phenomenal.
Exactly. Now, will the Canada-U.S. border open before July 1st?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't think it's before July 1st. I'm going to say no. I think that'll be the last thing they open up. They'll do travel within Canada. There'll be fewer restrictions there, and then eventually they'll get to the border, but I think that'll be delayed, not before July 1st.
Perfect. And finally, when does Manitoba remove the present state of emergency we're in so we can go back to normal lives?
When? Oh, I got to pick a time. I'm going to say end of the year. Or maybe before that. Maybe they'll go from the current zone, they'll go down a level and down a level after that, but maybe they'll go down one level by May. I'll give you May.
That's perfect. Well, you did the lightning round much better than I did because you finished your questions. I had to get cut off. Anyways, I think we did well with that. We'll continue to do this going forward now and then, but I mean, there's poignant answers. If you have an opinion, let us know.
You can always get a hold of us. You see it at the bottom of the screen there. Chat with Clinton and Kevin. That's part of our website, so you can go there, fill in the form, whatever it is. Maybe you have different answers to the lightning round questions, or you have something else you want to talk to us about. Let us know. Any parting comments here, Kevin?
No, I think you covered it all. That's perfect.
All right. We'll be back next week. Take care, everybody.